Hey guys, what's going on? DeJesus here. Thank you so much for joining us for another video. I hope you are having a great day no matter where you're at in the world. So let's go ahead, kick back, relax, and strap it down for the next 10 minutes or so, and we're gonna have ourselves another episode of Ask DCF. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, and we have a couple other very cool videos and collabs coming up here on YouTube that are in the works. So yesterday over on Instagram, we had you guys send in your questions. Thank you guys so much for submitting some really great questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and start looking through these on my phone, and let's go ahead and get started. Wait, hang on, one sec here. All right, stop, cut the music. Let's get some upbeat music going on in here. Let's go ahead and try to get the energy up a little bit, all right? Now try the next one. No, ooh, okay, all right, yeah, turn it up just a little bit more. Okay, all right, yeah, now let's go ahead and dive right in. Limitless Legacy 224 says, what is the custom you have in your mind and want to create but keep putting it off? There's definitely a ton of ideas I have, but one that I think would be really cool to bring to life is taking one of my favorite shoes of all time, the Nike SB Paris collab, and trying to translate that theme onto a Jordan 1 high. Now obviously Dunks translating into Jordan 1s work really well because the silhouettes are very similar, but what I would really want to do with these to make them stand out is for this to be one of the first pairs that I do when I finally get around to learning a little bit more about recon work. And I think that this would be the perfect pair to combine not only some incredibly detailed hand painting of trying to replicate that Bernard Buffett style artwork, but also mixing in that aspect of reconstructing a shoe and using some really premium materials, maybe even some exotic skins. I think that would make for a very exciting pair. Painter Thread says, ever turned down commission because a base model didn't fit idea? I can't think of any situation specifically where a customer and I just flat out weren't able to get on the same page at all as far as their design idea and what silhouette we would be doing it on. However, I definitely do think there's been times where I've done certain themes in the past that could have been better suited on a different base model, but I do think that's also one of the challenges and should be a talent of a custom sneaker artist, that you can handle any theme and try to translate it to the best of your ability on any given silhouette. I think a great example of this is taking something like Kanye's graduation album artwork, for example, and you've seen this theme done by a ton of sneaker artists out there. So here's a pair of Jordan 1s that I did. Obviously we can pack a ton of detail into a Jordan 1. However, I've also done this on a pair of NMDs, which were much more simplified. All we really tried to incorporate was that gradient, the colorway from the album, and then a little bit of detail within the tongue tag. Nowhere near as much detail on the Jordan 1, but still really trying to get the essence of the theme across. Tuddy A says, have you ever reached out to an athlete to do custom? So many years back when custom cleats were really just starting to grow in popularity in the NFL, what we did was send out hundreds of DMs to as many NFL players as we could possibly find. And here's what that message would look like. So here we have a convo with who would eventually become our buddy Devontae Adams of the Green Bay Packers, somebody who we would make weekly cleats for his first few years in the league until he eventually signed with Jordan Brand and they took over making his weekly cleats. I totally understand if Jordan Brand wanted to make weekly cleats for me. I probably wouldn't be too mad at that either. But really just sending the message out there to try to get people to first off just see your work is one of the biggest steps. After that initial message, the conversation can go so many different ways. It could also be totally dictated by how you word that initial message. Are you potentially reaching out to just flat out do a free pair of shoes for them? Or are you really just trying to get them to view your work, and then you could discuss business if they're interested in what they even see? So you could maybe say something like, the first pair is free, and if you really enjoy them, then we could discuss business from there. Or, hey, I just need you to see my work, and then I could tell you what type of deals we could work for you moving forward. I'm somebody who's definitely been a big proponent of free work in the past, but I'm also somebody who was incredibly stubborn when I was coming up, and I didn't want to do free work for anybody who wasn't willing to pay for it. That felt disrespectful to me, but I wasn't always able to see the business side of it. I wasn't always able to see that opportunity that can come from it. It's really going to depend on a situation by situation basis, depending on where you're at in your journey, depending on how busy you are. Can you even take on additional work that could come with some potential opportunity? Sometimes all you need is to get a foot in the door. This is something that we did 5 years ago, and these are still a lot of people that we work with on a very regular basis and who have pushed the word out even further, because like I said, sometimes you just got to get your foot in the door, and then from there, who knows what can come? Who knows what other teammates you'll get? Who knows what happens with their careers, if they're gonna get traded into other places and then have you in multiple locker rooms. A lot of good things can come from it. But I did see a great meme earlier that definitely relates to this situation that Selah Vic posted that I'll share with you guys. We all know what that's like. Jazz Custom Lab says, tips on airbrushing the tongue of an Air Force One. It's so difficult to get the sides inside of the shoe. There's a couple different tools that you can use. I like to use something like either a popsicle stick or even potentially a highlighter to really help stretch out near where the top lace hole is. So I'm gonna go ahead, open up the shoe, and then we're gonna place this highlighter about halfway down, and this is just gonna really help stretch out the shoe so that we can get all those hard to reach areas when you're trying to airbrush or paint a tongue on almost any shoe. You wanna definitely make sure that you don't forget about this and leave it in for a couple days or anything like that, because you could potentially end up with some weird stretches within your shoe. So just keep it in while you're gonna be working directly on your tongue. Jay Lawless says, general tips for YouTube growth. I'm a customizer and I plan to start posting this week. One of the biggest things with the YouTube algorithm is that you definitely want to start to establish a schedule so people sort of know when to expect videos from you, if that's going to be on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, whatever the case may be. Another thing that I really like to do is look at other niches and see what sort of style of videos are working really well for them. So something that I've always said over and over is I love to refer to the tattoo niche, see what's going on, see what type of videos people are doing within the tattoo niche, and see how I could sort of translate those into the custom sneakers space. Also, you certainly want to take a look at what's going on with your own niche, what's working really well in the custom sneaker space, and see how you could sort of replicate that but still put your own spin on. Mad Panda Custom Shoes says, I'm kind of in the dark about how to build customers. Could you give some insight? Thanks. I think that every artist you talk to might actually handle this topic a little bit differently, and there's probably no perfect way. Actually, scratch that. I guess the perfect way from the artist side would be to always get full payment up front. However, that may not always be suitable for you and your clientele. It's also sort of going to depend on the type of custom sneaker business that you run. Are you more often having clients send in their shoes to you where you at least have some type of collateral, or are you selling more pre-finished type designs where they're purchasing the shoes and the designs from you? The classic 50-50 split where you get half payment up front and half payment upon completion is probably a pretty decent method for all parties involved. But again, it's sort of going to depend on your risk tolerance. Some people may just flat out not want to take on projects where they're not getting full payment up front, and other people might be okay where potentially they have a little bit of collateral, or they're at least getting half the money up front. They're okay because things can happen with wait times and whatnot. They're okay with getting half that money upon completion. There's no perfect way, but again, you really can't go wrong from the artist side if you're always requiring full payment up front. Especially because the last thing you ever want is to be stuck with somebody's shoes in their given size with the design they requested, and then you're trying to resell them or something like that. That's just not a good look. You just don't want to put yourself in that situation. Rich Sherwood says, do you use Angelus dye for sock liners, or will just any Walmart brand of dye work? So I actually really don't recommend using any type of dye when it comes to things like sock liners that are going to be in contact with your socks or your feet in general, mainly because I think that even with proper heat setting, there's still a really good chance that some of that dye is going to wear off. And it's just going to end up in unwanted places like your socks. I have a pair of Chunky Dunky Jordan 1s that I painted last year. I also painted the sock liner with Angelus Paint and Too Soft and did a ton of heat setting, and this is a pair that I have worn a ton over the past year. I do still plan to make a durability test video to show how these have held up, but I was super curious to see what was going to happen with this sock liner, and all of the colors do still look really good and saturated. And anytime I wore these, I tried to make sure that I was wearing white socks so I could really tell if any paint was ever going to come off. And other than one time where I know I had to wear them for, I think it was like a 12-hour day, other than that one time, I never had any paint rub off onto my socks. Tyson Smith 23 says, how do you get customers when you're first starting out? Something like LV Vans on Etsy? The big issue with doing something like LV Vans on Etsy is because there's so many people doing it, the competition level is very high, and a lot of customers are most likely just gonna look for which one can get to me the fastest and which one is going to be the cheapest. So although this may be something that is popular, this may be something that could start to get you some clientele, this may not be what you want to be doing forever. So when you're just starting out, I think it's really important to try to gather as many friends and family members as you possibly can and paint shoes for them, potentially even for free, but just test out different designs, different art styles, get a feel for what you like doing when it comes to customizing, and put that art style out into the universe for people to see. Start building up your portfolio, doing the artwork style that you want to be selling to your ideal clientele. Clarissa Mariposa says, do you customize children's shoes? If so, how does pricing compare to adult sizes? Now this is tough because when it comes to working on some children's shoes, depending on the design, since they're so small, it might actually be a little bit harder. And I know that the initial thought concept is most likely, well, since it's smaller, less paint, I'll have less to do, it might be a little bit faster. Sometimes that's not always the case. Another thing about them being children's shoes is that obviously the kids are still growing, so they can only wear these shoes for so long. So your clientele, the parents, may not expect to spend as much as a typical custom shoe might cost because their kids can only wear them for a few months or something like that. So it's kind of tough. Sometimes you might need to find the right clientele who's on the same wavelength as you to really understand how much work is going to be going into these. Customed by Juice says, how do you go about prices being raised? Do you announce on Instagram or just go ahead and do it? So if things are going well for you as a business, you have a nice, steady, and growing clientele, and you feel it's time to raise your prices, I think that you're better off doing it slowly but surely. Just a little bit here, a little bit there, maybe every year, maybe every 6 months or so, you try to raise your prices, maybe something as little as 10%. That's still going to add up over time. And I think that you're gonna not drive away any clientele by just raising them 10% or so here or there, rather than making an announcement and saying, hey everybody, prices are doubling tomorrow, so make sure you get your orders in today. I think that if you go that first route and just do it slowly but surely, a little bit here, a little bit there, it's gonna go a long way for you. Lloyd Deasy says, how do you do elephant skin print, paint or vinyl? So elephant print is one of the hardest prints out there, no doubt, to replicate by hand. When it's done right, it looks absolutely incredible, but again, it is so hard to do. So if you have a vinyl stencil, you're definitely going to be able to achieve what people recognize as elephant print, whereas when you're trying to do it by hand, because it's so distinct, because it's so almost abstract per se, it's very hard to replicate. The last time that I tried doing it was on this pair of Jordan 6s in the Atmos colorway, and I think every time since, I've just used a vinyl stencil because it's also going to be just a whole lot easier and save you a big headache, in my opinion. Art by Sam Peck says, with something like Vans or soft shoes, do you use 2 soft with each layer of paint or only the first layer? So without a doubt, anytime we post a Q&A, the most asked question is always going to be about how to use 2 soft, how to use 2 thin, how do you know when to use one from the other. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we're gonna need to make a nice definitive guide style video to how to use all of these additives. But when it comes to working on something like, maybe if we take a Nike Roche, for example, where obviously the entire upper is made out of mesh, I think that it's very important to use 2 soft the entire time. If you're talking about painting a sock liner on a shoe, I think that it's very important to use 2 soft the entire time, because as soon as you don't and you're just working with the regular leather paint, it's going to create a much more stiff and harder feel on your fabric. And that's something that you certainly want to avoid when it comes to certain materials that you want to stay nice and soft. But if you run into the situation where you're just trying to do some really detailed work on maybe a mesh or a prime knit, I do think that it is a little bit less important as some of those layers go on. If you're maybe taking a look at doing the shark teeth on a pair of canvas Vans or something like that, maybe on some of those later layers, it could be a little bit less important. But there's always going to be a trade-off, because as soon as you remove the 2 soft, that material is going to stiffen up a bit. Sneaker Dr. Co says, what would you buy with $1,000 to start customizing? So we are right off the bat talking about a great budget to start. We've definitely done a couple of videos talking about things like, what would I buy if I only had $100 to start? But if you're really trying to dive in and invest $1,000 into this, some of the first things that I would buy are a bunch of paint. So I would probably allocate almost half of the money towards paint so that you could buy in larger quantities, because this is something that you're trying to do on a serious scale. So if we invest in some things like the pints, the quarts, stuff that's really gonna last, you don't need to refill every so often when you're only buying those 1 ounce paints. You're gonna get more bang for your buck if you allocate some money towards those larger bottles of paint that you can get. Then I think, of course, a great airbrush and compressor. The setup that I use is gonna run you under $200. You could get the Badger Patriot 105 for somewhere around $75, $85. You could also get the Harbor Freight compressor for around something pretty similar, maybe $70 or so. So you can get yourself airbrushing for $150, $175. And then I also think that a good vinyl cutter will go a long way for you. There's a lot of great options out on the market that you could find, plenty of new ones. You could even find used ones or models that are a couple years old and still brand new in the box. I think that you could find one of these for probably somewhere around $200. And then with the rest of the budget, I would just invest in some high quality things like brushes, stencils, maybe some different vinyls that you could play with. And I'd also probably try to pick up a pair of Air Force Ones, Jordan 1s, a really simple base shoe that you want to test out some different designs on. What you can do is paint the shoes, build some content around it for your portfolio, and then once you're done, you could acetone all of the paint off and repaint them again and again while testing out new designs and simultaneously building content, building out that portfolio, all while using the same base shoe. As long as it's not going to be worn, it's just for display, it's just for content purposes, it's totally okay to repaint the same shoe over and over. And with all that in mind, I think that you could really be off and running as a business if you were to invest in these things when starting out. And our final question of the day is going to come from Nick Kessler here, who says, if you could create your own color with Angelus, what would it be and what would you call it? So this is something that I have thought about quite a lot. And the one color that I definitely would love to see brought to life is going to be the LeBron 8 Solar Red color. Now this is a paint that I have paint matched myself, and this is the same exact color that I used on these Watermelon Air Force Ones. I've also used it on a bunch of different floral themes. I love this color. It's sort of almost like a neon. I did definitely throw a little bit of that neon Rio red into there, along with a lot of different reds and some whites to make this actual color. But if we could have a solar red color drop paint from Angelus, that would be amazing. I also do think that a nice DCF blue would work out very well, and that's a paint that I would love to see brought to life also. Alright guys, that's going to do it for me. Please be sure to go ahead and give this video a like if you haven't already. Make sure you're subscribed and comment some more questions down below that you would love to see featured in a future episode of Ask DCF. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this episode of Ask DCF. We want to remind everybody to please make sure you come and join us over in the official Toothpick Gang Discord. We will have that link down below. It's a great place to chat with other like-minded customizers. And make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter so you don't miss out on any news regarding our upcoming contest and the DCF Experience Part 2, which is coming soon.